Okay, so yet again coming at you with another tutorial. This time sort of a user request. This video will be going over ideas behind ultimate skills and how they work, and also the concept of getting out of a combo. Um, I know a user asked in the comments if there was a video in regards to getting out of combos, because when you look on YouTube, I guess, or at least when the person in the comments did, he couldn't really find anything on that, and again, I don't blame him. There's not any information in game about getting out of combos, and you just have to pray and hope that there's videos on YouTube that'll show you. But hopefully this will help you guys. But we'll be starting out first with ultimates. Um, so there's a bunch of different ultimates in the game, and essentially ultimates are, as you can see it on my screen, it's that big icon next to my skills and my shift and all that, all the way in the bottom left. It also has the Q icon above it because it's by default set to your Q key. And an ultimate is essentially supposed to be your most powerful skill. And in order to get your ultimate, you have to either take damage or deal damage, and it'll actually increase. If you can see the little yellow bar that builds around the icon. Actually, I think you can see it better if I do a move like this. Just pay attention to the bottom left corner. Yeah, see how that fills up? So once that full thing fills up all the way around, then your body will start to glow sort of like a yellowish red aura. And when that happens, that means that you are in rage, essentially, is actually, I believe, the state it's called. So when you fully fill up your Q button, or your ultimate skill, you will become in rage, or you will go into a rage state. And there's actually a couple things that happen while you're in rage, and I will explain to you those once I actually am pretty close to getting in rage. So hold up. This is our first jump cut of many. Alright, so I'm nearly full with my ultimate. As you can see in the bottom left corner, my ultimate is nearly completely full. And so essentially what will happen is, let me just attack a little bit more. And see how I now have this yellowish aura around me. I'm glowing a slight tint of yellow, and there's an aura essentially resonating from my character's body. So this means I have entered rage. And now rage doesn't last forever. Your ultimate doesn't last forever. This is important to keep in mind. And you can see it in the bottom left corner. You can sort of see the yellow is sort of fading from top to bottom. That's how long you have the ultimate for. So as soon as it fades all the way down, your ultimate resets. You have to fill it back up again in order to activate it. So there is a timer, I think it's around 30 seconds, that you have to use the skill. Now, when you're actually in rage, I believe you move a little bit faster, but that's not the important part. The important part is you actually gain mana. Let me actually use some skills. You gain mana a lot faster, and you also gain stamina back a lot faster. So usually, stamina regen is pretty whatever. But look at the stamina regen now. It's actually pretty fast, and even faster with sword, because sword is a breaker, so they regenerate even faster. So this means that in rage, it's actually easier to combo, because you don't have to worry about your stamina or your mana nearly as much as you were to before. So you can just sort of do whatever. But obviously, you don't just have rage. If you hit Q during any of this, you can activate your ultimate skill. I'll just do my sword ultimate for reference. So now I've activated my ultimate, and my ultimate has gone back, or the ultimate bar / gauge has completely reset, and I have to refill it again. And if I reset, I can tab out, tab into the sword again, and now you can see that buff that it gave me is gone, and I'd have to fill it up again to activate it again, essentially. So now I'm going to go into the different ultimates specifically, and I'm going to show you some things in regards to every single one of the ultimates. I'll be demonstrating this on 2 different characters because one of my characters actually has like all the ultimates, but I'll also use this one just because I'm already on it. Now I will say, actually, before I hop into those, there are two different types of ultimates for each class or karma in the game. The first ultimate is primarily a high break, high damage ultimate, but a lot of them are sort of risky to use, so that's the only difference. Is well, at least they're supposed to be more risky, but a lot of times they aren't. But in general, they're supposed to be a high risk, high damage, and high break move. And again, I'll get into those as I go. But then the second ultimate for each class is actually a buff skill, essentially. It's a buff ultimate. It's an ultimate that gives you a really nice buff. So you actually saw it with my sword. I activated an aura, and that aura essentially extended my hitbox of my sword whenever I swing it. So again, I'll be more specific as I get into the two. But again, just keep that in mind. Every single class has a damage skill or a damage ultimate and a buff ultimate. Every single one does. First, I'll be starting out with sword. Alright, so here I have Sword Ult 1. As you can tell, I'm already in rage. Now, there are a couple things to mention about Sword Ult 1. It essentially is a AoE meteor strike ability. You will swing the sword around you, and then you'll swing with the meteor strike. But there is a key thing to note. I think it does tell you in the description of the skill, you can activate this twice. You need to have at least one full bar of mana. As you can see at the bottom of my screen, I have multiple bars. You need one full bar of mana to activate the ultimate again, and you'll do a second strike. And the way you can do this is just by hitting left click. I would just mash left click, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if there's a certain window of timing that you need, but I would just mash left click after you hit Q. So I'll do it right now. So here comes the first one, and I'm mashing left click, and there's the second one. And it's really that simple. Again, it's an area around you. So I said AoE. It's not the biggest AoE when you compare it to some other ultimates, but it is an area around you, and then it'll actually auto-target the nearest enemy to you. It also might auto-target in the direction your camera's facing, and then it'll just swing at them and swing a meteor strike. And again, if you hit left click, and you could probably have seen it when I activated it, but if you mash left click, it'll do a second swing, and you'll use 1 bar of mana, which is nice. There are key things to note though. So for one, if you noticed at the beginning, I did a single strike that stunned the enemy first. This is really important to keep in mind because stuns don't stack. That is an important concept to gather. Stuns don't stack. So, for example, if I were to do this skill into my ultimate, see how that stunned the enemy? If I did that into the ultimate, which would have, in theory, stunned them again, it actually doesn't stack. And so what would happen is it would hit them and stun them for like a brief second, and then they would immediately be able to get out of the ultimate. And that's what you don't want to avoid. Because one thing about the sword's ultimate that I just showed you right now, is it's actually one of the most vulnerable. Like, remember how I said some of the first ultimates are high risk, high damage? This is an example of a high risk, high damage, because as soon as that skill ends, I still can't move for a couple of frames, but the enemy can definitely hit me. In fact, as soon as the final swing is just like completely done, my character I think sort of swings the sword a little bit backwards or whatever, but there's an end animation where you're completely left vulnerable, so you have to be careful when you're using this skill. And also what should be noted is, and I'll get to Rage Break later, but if you do use this skill on an enemy that's in Rage, they will be able to Rage Break the skill, assuming they do it at the beginning. They have to Rage Break during the stun. If they don't, then they will take all of the skill, or all of the ultimate. Alright, so moving on to the next ultimate. Alright, so here I have the second sword ultimate. So again, like I said, the second ultimate for each class is a buff instead of a high damage one. They're also a lot less risky because of that, but they don't necessarily have the same exact amount of damage, obviously because it's really dependent on the user and how you use the buff. If you end up dying immediately after you use the buff, then obviously the ultimate sort of goes to waste. So that's sort of the whole idea, is at least with the first ultimate, as long as you land it once, you'll get all the damage, whereas this is completely reliant on the user and how much they end up making out, or how much they end up doing with it. But in my case, with sword, I can just hit Q, and you'll summon, I believe they call it Infinity Blade or Infinite Blade. And actually, if you left click, again, this has another left click extension. If you left click after you activate the ult, you actually send the enemy into a chase, similar to like doing this and then chasing like that. So actually I can demonstrate that. So if I hit Q, left click, chase, and then you can immediately combo after using the skill. And notice the hitbox of all my skills is a lot bigger. And this makes comboing with sword a lot easier. And it also makes like objective based game modes like Conquest and CTF a lot less harder for you to deal with, because you know you essentially have control over the whole point when you have Infinite Blade out. Oh, and there it goes. And now I have to fill up my Q gauge or my ultimate gauge again to use it. Also, I just realized in the process of recording this video, there are a lot of ultimates. 7 classes, each one has 2, that's 14 ultimates, and unfortunately there's actually no way to reset or like immediately fill your gauge, so I have to physically reset it or fill up my gauge myself every single time I'm going to show you guys an ultimate. So unfortunately I won't be going through all of them. Actually, I'll only be going through the 2 I just showed you, because I think they give the central idea, which is again that once your first skill or your first ultimate is a high damage, high break ultimate, second ultimate is a buff ultimate. That's how it is for all classes. I'll talk a little bit about them back in the lobby, because I do want to mention some stuff about each one of them, but I won't be showing them off individually, unfortunately, so do bear in mind. So see you out in the lobby. Alright, so here we are back in the lobby, and I've already showed you the 2 ultimates on the sword. And actually, I guess I should specify, you get your first ultimate as part of your level 1 of your skill, so you immediately unlock it as soon as you unlock the Karma. However, in order to get the second ultimate, you will have to get your Karma to level 3. As you can see, it's right here, Infinite Blade. That is the second ultimate skill, or rage skill they have it as. And the first one, Raging Strike, is at level 1. So do keep that in mind. Anyway, so next we have Witch, right? So Witch's first ultimate is called Meteor. This is one of the best ultimates in the game. It's a completely ranged AoE Meteor Strike skill. Does a ton of damage. Again, it's super big, wide range. I think it might be one of the biggest. I think only Bow Ult 1 and maybe Hammer Ult 1 ties with it. But it does more damage than like all the other ones anyway. And you can combo off of it, you can attack off of it. It's so good, especially in team battles. It is one of the best ultimates. Technically, you are vulnerable when you cast Meteor, but if you cast it on yourself, because you can do that, the enemy can't really do much about that. So do keep that in mind. But Witch's second ult is here, Demonic Awakening, level 3. You can read the description right there. Essentially, as soon as you activate it, it resets all of your skill cooldowns. It also increases your mana as well. It drastically increases your mana regen. And of course, as you can see, it decreases your casting time while increasing break damage, mana, cooldown, speed of all your skills for a set duration. So all your skills are pretty much near instant, and they recover extremely fast. So you can just use your skills over and over again really fast. It's essentially like Super Saiyan mode with for Witch, to be honest. Alright, and so we have Bow. So the first ultimate for Bow is Great Spirit's Ascent. This is one where you actually have to aim the ultimate. So you sort of, as soon as you hit Q, you go into a stance, almost like you're holding down right click with Bow. And then if you hit left click while you're in that stance, you will fire the bird, or you will fire a bird in that direction, and it slows down people that are near you. It doesn't slow down people that are far away, so it is sometimes hard to hit people from a distance with this skill. In general, this is probably one of the worst ultimates. There are some ultimates that are a lot better than others. This one is somewhat okay, but it's very easy to dodge, and most of the time you'll never actually hit the enemy with this unless you're in like a 3v3 5v5 mode where everybody's everywhere. You're probably going to hit at least one person. But it does deal decent damage. It actually deals pretty good damage. I wouldn't necessarily say meteor damage, but it does do a pretty good amount of damage, but it's just sort of hard to hit on the enemy if they know what they're doing. And arguably an arguably better ultimate, and at the very least a more annoying ultimate, is Great Archer's Soul. So Great Archer's Soul essentially turns you into a sentry, and all your arrows have like double the travel distance, and they also all home in. So you actually just, well, you also shoot faster. So you move faster, I think. You shoot faster. Um, your skills activate faster, and again, it doubles your arrow's distance. It increases their break, I think, as well, maybe. But it's just, and they also all home in. So again, very, very annoying and somewhat lethal to go up against an archer with this. Like, you actually just can't approach them unless you were already really close to begin with. But if you're far away, yeah, good luck. So this one is a pretty good one, just because, again, it homes in, it does so much damage, and you can't really approach an archer when they use this. You have to run away. Alright, so now we have Dual Souls. So Dual Souls, the first skill that they have, or the first ultimate they have, is Massacre. Massacre is essentially, it summons a gigantic tornado, which it sort of says in the description, and it will follow the enemies for quite a while. I think the skill lasts about 10 to 15 seconds. You can combo with it, but you can only really do that if the enemy is already in the air, because the tornado doesn't lift up the enemy or keep them in the air. It actually just pulls them down. Or I wouldn't necessarily say it pulls them down, but it just doesn't keep them in the air. So if they are in the air, they will eventually fall and hit the ground, and they will be able to shift out of the skill. That should be something I mentioned, is that you can't shift out of any of these ultimates. I should have mentioned that before, but you cannot shift out of any of the ultimates except for this one. This is a ultimate that you can shift out of. You can't shift out of it immediately, but after the tornado is already out and on the field, you can shift out of it. It will burn your emergency escape. So do keep that in mind. But again, if you get hit, like if we go back to Witch, if you get hit by Meteor, if we go back to Sword, if you go back to Raging Strike, any of these first ultimates, you can't shift once you're already being hit. If you're hit by them, you cannot shift out. And Massacre is the only one where if you are hit by it after it's already out in the field, you can shift out. So do keep that in mind. And then the second, and again, potentially much better ultimate for Dual Souls is Soul Blade. So this essentially, sort of like another Super Saiyan mode. You summon a lot of swords whenever you activate commands, and in general, this actually primarily affects your command. So do keep that in mind. It doesn't actually affect any of your skills, but essentially you summon a bunch of blades, whether you're left clicking or right clicking, your attacks will summon blades and attack the opponent and home in on them. And you'll deal a lot more damage because of that. Some of your commands will actually end differently. Like I think if you do a Moon Slash, it'll actually create like, I don't know, like a resonating sphere that will keep the enemy in the air for a couple of seconds while dealing more damage. So in general, it's actually a pretty good skill. And as soon as you activate it, actually, it hits the enemy and allows you to immediately catch them. So assuming you're close to them at least. So it is a pretty good skill in that regards. But again, it is a high damage buff skill. So that's pretty much it. Alright, so now we have Fist. So Fist's first one is Falling Star. This one, you essentially, as soon as you activate it, you will stun anybody in the nearby vicinity of your character, and you will immediately go up into the sky, and then if you left click anywhere, you will fall right back down and essentially cause an explosion in the nearby area. This skill is actually one of the best first ultimates in the game, outside of Meteor. Obviously it doesn't deal as much damage, but it still actually deals a pretty decent amount of damage for a breaker, and it also, again, it stuns enemies, and even if it doesn't stun them, you can still land on an enemy afterwards if they just fail to dodge, or if they don't have a dodge in the first place, or if your teammate has them. So it's just really good overall, I think. Again, it's got pretty decent area of effect. But the second ultimate is right here, Devoted Awakening, another, sort of all-out buff skill. So this one essentially, I believe it increases your endurance. Yeah, it says it increases your endurance and movement speed. This one actually does allow for a command follow-up. That should be something actually I might show off. So if you do see that later in the video, then you'll see it. But for now, essentially, all of your attacks will cause explosions, which it says. All of your command attacks, though, similar to Dual Souls, and Soul Blade, this only affects your commands. This one also only affects your commands. Devoted Awakening only affects your commands. And so again, every single one of your command hits will deal an explosion. And anytime you do a shoulder tackle, so I believe it's shift click or your dodge attack. If you do your dodge attack and then you mash the W key, or you just dash immediately after doing the dodge attack, you'll actually do a special command combo that you can only do in Devoted Awakening. You can't do it without the Rage skill activated. So again, I might show that off, not too sure, but that is the general gist of this. The problem though with Devoted Awakening is, while it does increase your endurance and movement speed and all that, it doesn't, like, you still have to approach the enemy when you use this ultimate. So if you're already struggling to approach the enemy before using this ultimate, then this ultimate isn't really going to help you in that regard. And most people, when they use an ultimate, they want some form of damage, so that's why people don't really use this. I could see this being good for objective-based game modes as well, like Conquest, but in terms of like Deathmatch and Capture the Flag, this might not be the most useful thing. I guess Capture the Flag, it could work out, but Deathmatch, people would probably go for Falling Star. And even CTF, you probably want to go for Falling Star, because you can target people capping the flag. So, I don't know. And then we have Hammer. So Hammer, first one is Ultimate Hammer. This one is very similar to Meteor, and even Fist, Falling Star. It's actually pretty similar to it, except this one is a cast, so you cast in a given area away from you, or on top of you if you want, and you can just slam a giant, or you essentially summon a giant hammer to strike the ground, and it causes constant hit stun in the area, so essentially you control that zone. I believe it actually slows down enemies, and it also just causes constant hit stun. It deals a decent amount of damage, as well as, especially if the enemy is in the air, then it deals like an insane amount of damage. But do keep that in mind. So then the second ultimate is right here, Faith. So Faith, this is arguably another better ultimate, but I think both Hammer ultimates are actually pretty good. Again, this one does extremely high damage, and essentially gives you full control over an area, whereas this one essentially makes, so you constantly, as soon as you activate this skill, you will constantly heal yourself just a little bit every second, and if an ally is near you, they'll actually also get healed. You'll see a little radius of green energy surrounding your character. But the more important thing is that this actually revives any allies pretty much in a relatively large vicinity. So this is actually really good for objective-based maps where, like, you know, you're on Conquest, your enemy just died, or your ally just died, you want to revive them on the point, then you just, you know, hit Q, activate Faith, and boom, they're ready to go right on the point. So it is good in that regards, and I guess it should also be said that if the enemy is near you when this skill is in effect, it'll actually slow down their attack speed, and I think their movement speed maybe as well. So do keep that in mind. And then finally we have Cannon. Cannon, actually here, unlock it then. Normal unlock, boom, there we go. So Cannon has, again, first skill, Atomic Blast. This one's actually a bit more of a unique first ultimate. You have to aim in an area and then it'll shoot straight forward. I guess you could say it's more similar to like Bow Ult 1, the Great Spirit Descent. It's sort of similar in that regards. You do have to aim it, and then you just left click in the direction. Or actually, I don't even think you have to left click. I think you just aim in the direction, hit Q, and then it'll just fire. But it isn't the easiest to land, and to be honest, the second ultimate is just a lot better. And we'll get into that right now. So the second ultimate is Bullet Time, and this one, this is pretty crazy. So first of all, unlike other buff ultimates, like you know, Faith or Soul Blade, these will, as soon as you activate it, any enemy near you will take some hit stun, but most of the time they can shift out. Actually DS you can't shift out, but like Bows you could shift out, Demonic Awakening you can shift out, again Faith you can shift out. Cannon, as soon as Bullet Time is activated, you immediately stun enemies near you. You just slam the cannon down and it will immediately stun anybody near you. And then after that, you essentially go into a stance where you just mash right click. At least I think it's right click, yeah. You mash right click and you will just fire a bunch of missiles that all home in, that all deal insane damage, and it can 100 to 0 somebody. Sometimes it can even bypass their rage break. And essentially, again, it has the potential to 100 to 0 people and do an insane amount of damage. This bullet time is actually one of the scariest ultimates, in my opinion. Especially for a buff ultimate, I'd argue it's one of the best. So it's absolutely crazy. But there's that. Alright, so now on to emergency escapes and getting out of combos as well as rage breaks. So what is an emergency escape? I actually talked about it in my last video, but essentially it's your dodge, which is your left shift, but if you use it while getting hit, it actually goes on an 8-second cooldown. Here I'll actually have Yozora can hit me, keep hitting me, yeah. See, and now my shift went on a cooldown. Um, Again, it's about 8 seconds I think we calculated it to be. But you're very vulnerable during this, so do keep that in mind. But it is important to know, again, if you are getting hit and you are in a combo or something, you can literally just try to mass shift to get out. Do note, you can only do this though when you're grounded. So here, Yozora, I want you to try to combo me, but like keep me in the air. Yeah, so I am mashing shift right now. I cannot get out of this until I hit the ground, in which case I can. And so be it. So do keep in mind, again, emergency escape is just a way to get out of combos. Really helpful, but you do need to be on the ground. And I mentioned in my previous video that the idea is to keep the enemy in the air so that that doesn't happen. So for the most part, you're not really going to actually be using your emergency escape in terms of getting out of combos. Rather, you might end up burning your emergency escape when it comes to neutral exchanges. And I'll sort of talk about that. So there's sort of this idea of what I call an endurance escape. So as long as you have endurance, you can essentially get out of anything without burning your emergency escape. So for example, if here, you know what, I'm going to do a spin attack. So I'm going to have you spin, Yozora, do your spinning attack, and I'm also going to do mine at the same time. See how I took a couple of its hits. It's for a brief couple seconds, but I still took a couple of its hits, and because it didn't break my armor, I was still able to shift out, and it didn't put my emergency escape on cooldown. So that's sort of the idea of this type of endurance escape, because when you're in the neutral with the enemy, you're going to have a lot of endurance-based battles. You know, if I'm casting Storm Slash, I have purple armor, and as long as that armor doesn't completely break, I can shift out for free, and I don't get it on a 8-second cooldown. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, there is technically one other way, and this is very, very special, and only this is only for dual souls. Is there's a skill called Demon Mode, and it is essentially another emergency escape in the sense that as long as you are on the ground and you mash this skill, which in this case it's my E skill, I can get out of the combo for free essentially. So I'll have Yozora combo me on the ground again, so I can use it to get out. Again, it gives me iframe similar to the emergency escape, and I'm still invisible and I can actually just hop back in to being visible. So that is technically an exception. It's the only skill in the whole entire game so far that actually allows something like that to happen. So again, if you are using dual souls, that is something to keep in mind, or if you're going against a dual souls player, that is also something to keep in mind when you're comboing them, is that if they do end up on the ground, they can activate that. But there is a more important thing, I think, which is Rage Break. So Rage Break is actually tied to your ultimate. And this is something they don't actually explain in the game, and I know a lot of people actually, especially I think at lower ranks, or if you're a new player to this game, you don't even know it's there. But a Rage Break is essentially a get out of combo free card. It is tied to your ultimate, and I talked about previously that your ultimate is your Q button, so your Rage Break is also the Q button. You can only activate a Rage Break once your Rage bar is filled, and once I get that orange glowing aura, that's how you know that you're in Rage, and you can use a Rage Break. You know, I'll do a jump cut real quick, and get myself in Rage. Alright, so now I have Rage. Got it pretty fast because I was in Dual Souls, which I didn't keep in mind when I was getting attacked, but it's okay. So now, essentially what I'm going to have Yozora do is I'm going to have him do a more practical combo as if he were to try to 100 to 0 me. Um, so you can go ahead and start doing that now. So I'm in the air. I can't normally use my shift during any of this, but if I hit Q, I can now get out for free. And you saw that my rage bar now completely reset. I have to regain all my rage. But I essentially expelled all my rage and I was able to get out of that combo for free, even though I was in the air. So that is something really useful to keep in mind. And sometimes there's questions of, can my partner peel me, or can my partner interrupt the enemy's combo, or should I use my rage break? Those are decisions you sort of have to make on the fly as you're engaging in the game and whatnot. But it is just in general a good idea to keep an eye out that you can rage break. It is something you can do. I know I've seen people complain that, oh, I get 100 to 0 to the fact that I can't escape this combo. You can escape this combo. You have a resource. You have actually multiple resources. Again, between emergency escape and rage break, you have at least 2 resources to get out of a combo. And one of them is like a guarantee get out of jail free card, essentially. So again, just keep that in mind. And hopefully this helped you out. I know it's a bit of a long video. And I know I didn't go over all the ultimates either. Again, like I said, there were actually a lot, and I really only wanted to go over like the conceptual differences between the first ultimate and the second ultimate for each karma. But either way, hope this video helped you, especially if you're a new player, and I will see you in the next video.